Okay, so now we are going to do a screen replacement on an iPhone 7. And so typically the thing about this is that the screens, there are a few different pieces. So this is a piece of actual, just the glass with the frame on it, is what we call this part. So we've got the glass, which the technical name of that is a lens, and then there's this plastic frame with these metal clips on it. That's what actually holds the screen into the phone. And then we have a layer called optical clear adhesive, and so we have a sheet of that right here. And so this is what kind of makes it, a little pricey. So it's unfortunate that when the glass breaks, the LCD still works, but everything has to be replaced together. So this is an actual LCD from an iPhone 7, and so this is also a few different pieces. So we've got a thing called a polarizer here. Let me grab one. So here is a polarizer, and so this is actually adhered directly to the LCD. There's actually one on here from the factory. We remanufacture these displays because if it just has cracked glass and it passes our quality test, then the original display is actually a lot higher quality than an aftermarket display. So yeah, this allows you to actually see the picture that's on the screen from the LCD itself, because this LCD technology, the LCD itself is just like a super thin piece of incredibly fragile glass. And then we have, you can see this plastic part here and the metal part. So this is a backlight, and this metal piece has the 3D touch panel in it. And so underneath this flex cable, there's a little IC, and then the connector for the home button. But the way that an LCD works, at least my understanding of it, my limited understanding of it, is that there is a strip of LEDs that go across here, and so that lights up the light box, the backlight of the display assembly, and shines light through the LCD itself. And then the polarizer is there to make it look right, and then you can see the screen. So it is very interesting, but just for a simple screen replacements, everything gets replaced at the same time. So we remanufacture the displays themselves, but it's a very tedious process, and it's not something we can offer and do just one at a time. It's something that I won't even touch unless I have at least 25 of them. So there you go, a little background on how LCDs work. And so when we work on customers' phones, there's a lot of functionalities on these phones that people don't even know about, like the ambient light sensor and the proximity sensor, and it's got a few different microphones on it. It's got one at the bottom, one at the back, and one on the front behind the ear speaker mesh. So what we do is go ahead and test everything out before we work on them to try to identify and make sure that they're not having any other issues with their phone. So we just check the buttons first: volume up, volume down, mute switch, power, sleep, wake button, home button. That's all functional. And then one of the most important parts, the camera. So there we go, we just test it front and back. And if this was a live customer phone, I would just hold my thumb over the, there's a little thumbnail here. And so we respect people's privacy, and we don't want to see what's on your device. We just want to fix your phone. We have no interest in your personal data other than, you know, your phone number and your address to get a hold of you to work on the phone, and your name, email, and ways to keep in contact with you. So we go ahead and test out the touch functionality and make sure we still have touch functionality in the broken display. And we do that by grabbing an app icon and just swirling it around. So if there was a bad spot on the screen, you know, it's usually just the screen, or, you know, it could potentially be bigger problems. There's some models of phones that had a thing called touch disease. So if there was a bad spot on the screen, you can watch here that if I let go of it, that just flies back into place there. So if I did that and it flew back into place without me lifting my finger, then I'd know that you know, there was a touch issue with this screen, or potentially with this phone. So that's good on this phone. We want to make sure the biometrics work, and typically if this was an active phone, this is just a phone that was purchased from a customer to lower their repair bill, and then, you know, we're going to recondition it and resell it, put a new battery in it and everything. But if this was a live customer phone and they had their fingerprint programmed into it, so then all we have to do to test the fingerprint sensor is set our finger on it. And if it denies our finger and it shakes, it says try again, then we'll know that you know, it is reading fingerprints, and it didn't read ours, which is a good thing, because that's a huge security measure. But if we don't have Touch ID set up already, we just go into settings and go to Touch ID and passcode, and we don't add our fingerprint to customers' phones, but we just make sure it's reading a fingerprint, so that's good. You can see it's turning red. You hit cancel. So if that doesn't happen, and the or the home button is cracked and it can't read a fingerprint, unfortunately that's something we cannot repair. The fingerprint sensor is paired to the logic board of the phone, to the motherboard, and it has to be reprogrammed by Apple. So that way, you know, I couldn't program my fingerprint into this home button and then switch it into somebody else's phone and open their phone. So that would be a huge security flaw. So yeah, we can replace the buttons and have you know, a working home button, but we can't replace that touch functionality, or the Touch ID anyways. So at this point, we've tested most of the functions of the phone. We want to make sure that it's seeing Wi-Fi, and this one doesn't have a SIM card in it, but you know, if it did, we'd go ahead and dial a number. We usually just dial our own number and connect a call, and then as soon as the call connects, we go ahead and hold our finger over the there's a proximity sensor up here that when you hold the phone to your head, it turns the screen off. So it will actually, you know, turn it off when you're talking on the phone. That way your cheek doesn't, you know, touch buttons and open apps and call other people or whatever it does. So we do that, and then we hold the phone up to our ear, make sure that the ear speaker is nice and loud and clear. If it isn't, then there's probably just gunk built up in this ear speaker mesh. Then we switch and put it on speakerphone and make sure you know, we can hear on speakerphone, and also make sure people can hear us loud and clear. The way I do this is just I'm calling myself, and so I just you know, while it's on speakerphone, I talk and I hold my own phone up to my ear and listen, make sure it's nice and clear. And then take it off speakerphone, do the same thing. So we're just testing microphones at this point. There's a rear microphone as well. That's very rarely ever fails, so I usually don't test that. But yeah, then we go ahead and hang up. And it's important to note that if you're in a low service area and it sounds crackly, it could be because of the service. And actually, it's most likely because of the service. If there's only 2 bars, then that's usually the case. So to begin replacing the screen, we're going to go ahead and power the phone off. There we go. And we get our pentalobe screwdriver. Here's our little mix of tools here that we use. All this stuff. We've got an EEPROM programmer to copy the serial number off the original screen and program it to the new screen. Pentalobe screwdriver, our little metal card opening tool, and our black spudgers. There's lots of these around. Our cat claw needle nose tweezers, our Phillips 000 driver, and our tri-wing driver. So I usually work left to right, just because I'm right-handed. Potentially might do it the other way, whatever you're most comfortable with. But we start off with the pentalobe screwdriver, and just very carefully and you make sure we're seated into the head of the screw. These are very easy to strip out, so it's always a bad time when you do strip them out. You can use cut a little piece of a rubber band and stretch your, put that over your tip of your driver and kind of jam it in there and kind of work it out slowly but surely. And then sorry for the pause. I thought my phone was going to die there. But yeah, so if you get a strip screw down here, there's a couple methods to get them out. The main one, the first thing you want to try is cut a little piece of rubber band and put it over the tip of your driver like this. What that does is just kind of fill in the gaps and give you a little grip on the screw. But you're gonna have to kind of an art form, something you just have to play around with for a little while. But this is how I do it. I just get a little piece of rubber band here and put it over my tip of my screwdriver, or sometimes I just set it right on the head of the screw and then just get in there real easily and just gently and firmly back it out. But really, you just want to avoid that. It's just a pain in the butt. The other way that we do that is that you can see here on this piece of glass, these are the receivers for the screw, and so they're just connected to this plastic part here, and so you can basically just break those off if you have to. That is kind of risky, but as long as you're careful and don't go crazy on it, you'll be fine. So the iPhone 7 and 7 Plus, 8, 8 Plus, the home buttons, the flex cable for the home button goes over this way. And so when we insert our metal card, which there's a little gap between the plastic frame of the screen itself and the housing of the phone. We call this rear part the housing. Some people refer to it as the frame of the phone, but housing is what we say. And so we don't want to get this metal card shoved in too far and damage a flex cable. The flex cables for the motherboard are on this side. They're actually right here, and so we don't want to damage those either. The ear speaker and the front facing camera flex, which connects all this stuff, that's right up here, so we just want to be careful. So we start down here on the bottom left hand side of the screen and just get under there and then work our way across. And once we have the bottom up, which there is like an adhesive seal that goes around these. Here's an example of one. So this helps to give the phone a little bit of water resistance. It also helps to, we think it helps to, you know, let the 3D touch functionality work. But yeah, the main purpose is to help keep water out of there. So once we get the bottom down, we just go up the sides, and you can see I don't have my tool in there very far, and then we just lift it up on both sides. Now you don't want to lift too high because there are flex cables. We just open up just enough to get a little grip on it. Then we move to the top and press down. You can also kind of wiggle it a little bit like this, and it'll come loose. So there are built-in like little hooks up here at the top of the frame of the screen itself that attach underneath the lip of the housing here. And so now we've got it open up. So you want to be careful you don't open up too much. This front-facing camera flex cable doesn't have too much give to it. You could easily rip that off and you know, cause yourself a little bit of headache. But we usually keep those on hand in case that does happen. And then we're gonna move to the tri-wing screwdriver. So we've got two plates we have to take off here to get the screen off of the phone. And so these tri-wings, these screws are all different sizes, and we just keep them in order. So I've got a magnetic mat that I'm working on here, and we set these screws out just the way they came out of the phone. So the screws, they either go into the into receivers that are like welded and built into the motherboard, or they go into receivers that are like spot welded into the frame or the housing of the phone. So the ones that go into the housing are longer, and the ones that go into the motherboard receivers are shorter. So if you put screw in the wrong place, a long screw or a short screw should be, you could be basically drilling it right through the motherboard. So here is our shield, and I mean it's basically a retainer as well for our connections here. So you can see this is the connector for the charging port. So it basically lays right under the motherboard, which the motherboard goes from here all the way up to here and then over. And so the charging port goes underneath that, and underneath this here is your loudspeaker, like when you're on speakerphone or playing music. Charging port goes under those two things and then comes all the way across here. And so that's what that connector is. This here is the battery connector, which you can trace the flex cable right down here to the bottom of the battery. And then we have our connector for our LCD and our digitizer, which is the technical name for the part that senses your touch. So we've got that plate off, we get the top plate, and that one helps hold down the connection for the front-facing camera flex. So one of the most important things you can do when you are working on a phone is to disconnect the battery. So you want to just verify that the phone's off by pressing the home button, or just quick pressing the power sleep wake button. And then we just get our spudger just under the very tip of the connector and disconnect our battery. This way we don't turn the phone on while we're working on it. If we do that, then you know, it's getting electricity and trying to send it to show a display on the screen. But if we have the screen off, it could potentially damage the little chips that send power to the screen. And so then after that, if that happens, we won't be able to see a picture on our screen unless we shine a flashlight into it. So we're going to go ahead and disconnect our LCD flex cable and our digitizer flex cable. The one at top is doesn't really have that much of a lip on it. We can get it from right back here though. Their black spudger, the bottom left side of it there, and our screen is off. So we're going to go ahead and set the actual phone to the side for now, and all we have to do now is transfer some screws from the old screen to the new screen. And so there's also a back plate here, which we have to transfer over as well. So you can see here that the flex cable for this screen, and this is one we've already remanufactured, put new glass on it. The glass that we use is the highest quality that you can get, and you know, it's good stuff. It does not get broken by nightstands, although lots of customers like to say that for some reason. But yeah, it's good stuff. We test it out, we bend it, we throw it off the ground, all that kind of stuff, and it's good. So here we have, up here we have the ear speaker, and I'll get all this stuff off. So we're just going to start there with our 000 Phillips screwdriver, and we're just going to set the screws out just like they come out of the phone. So there are, what, 6 screws up top here of all different sizes. See, we got a long one right there, and already another little tiny short one. But we set them out in the same pattern they are, so we don't get them confused. There we go. Now that retainer bracket just lifts right off, and we can just fold. This is our selfie cam, our front-facing camera. And then this here is the ear speaker, which the ear speaker connects to the cable here with these tiny little springs. And so we have to be careful not to damage those. And now we need to get our flex cable off of the phone. So this is where one of the most useful tools comes into play. This is 99% pure isopropyl alcohol. It's electronics grade, and the reason we say it's electronics grade is because it's almost pure, and so it evaporates very quickly, very quickly. We can see there, it just comes right out. So we're not going to damage anything with it, but it also works as a great solvent. So the flex cable is this upper flex cable is kind of like folded over on itself a bunch of times, and so it's also adhered with like double-sided tape. And so we get up under there with the end of our super sharp tweezers, taking care not to like damage the flex cable itself. And then we've got our proximity sensor and our ambient light sensor under here, and they're in brackets. And sometimes the brackets, when they glue them on, they get a little extra glue and they get stuck in there. So we just gently lift up and get those free, and there we go. We've gotten our front-facing camera flex out. So this is a really interesting piece, and that's why I'm saying it over and over and over again. We've got multiple components on here. So this is your selfie cam. This is the connector for the ear speaker itself. We also have, if I unfold it here, you can see the upper microphone, which you can always tell if it's a microphone if it's a little like brass colored, gold colored box. This one's got a little piece of foam padding on it to protect it, and then the little hole for the microphones over here. So this is the one that picks it up, like if you're on a FaceTime call or a speakerphone. Then we have our proximity sensor. It looks like little spider eyes here, and our ambient light sensor, which the ambient light sensor has a little rubber boot that it sits in, and ambient light sensor goes into this little socket here on the frame of the screen itself. Then our proximity sensor sits in this little bracket here, which the screens don't always come with these, so sometimes you have to transfer them. But we just want to make sure when we get it back in there we lined it up, because there's two little holes there for it to look through. It's kind of like a pair of eyes. So here's our bracket for our selfie cam. Sometimes these need to be transferred over as well, which if these need to be transferred over, you just kind of get into the corner of them and pop them out, and try to hold your finger over it so they don't go flying. But you can see here there's a notch in it that matches the frame, so there's only one way to put it in. All you have to do is look at it. So we'll just set that off to the side just in case our new one doesn't have it, and we'll do the same thing with our prox brackets. Now on these black screens, for the ambient light sensor, it's got a little white sticker in there that we're going to want to transfer over. They have a tendency to grow wings as well, which that one just did, so I'll have to tip that later. But anyways, we're going to go ahead and remove the retainer bracket for our home button here. So these are tri-wing screws, and my method here on keeping my screws organized is to set these underneath the set them underneath the battery retainer bracket here. And we're going to go ahead and expose our home button. These just lift right out, there's no adhesive or anything. So the first thing we have to do to get the home button out is unclip the connection. So the home button flex cable goes over here. It's got a little chip for it that we call the turtle IC, and then it folds over on itself, and this is the connector. And so you can see, like on the replacement screen here, this is a connector where it connects, and then it goes up through and actually connects to the motherboard with this. So it's integrated into the same like cable as the digitizer. So go ahead and pop it off like that. Sometimes it's easier to take a black stick, a spudger, and hold that connector down and then pop it off. But at any rate, we've got it off now, and what we want to do is just kind of gently fold that up, and then we're going to use our old trusty 99 and just make a little pool of it right there. And so the best method here to start removing the home button, because it's adhered with double-sided tape as well, and this is something we have to be extremely careful with, because remember, if we damage this, we have to get Apple to replace it. They replace them with every screen replacement, so we're just going to start where it bends. That's really the best spot, and just knock it right off like that. So there we go. That one was extremely easy, but usually this is like something you really want to take your time on. Make sure that you're not getting in between the layers of the flex cable itself, because you could damage it, and just being extremely careful with that. So we'll set that off to the side, and then we just need to remove our back plate so we can transfer that. So these are tri-wing screws, Sometimes it's hard to get a grip on them because these little posts, they'll flex a little bit. And so one way to stop that from happening is just to hold it with your thumb and press on the back of it while you get the screw started. These are gonna be a little tricky. The driver can kind of skip on the head of the screw, and you just want to be very careful that you don't strip these out, because it's just a pain if you do. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. I always set them like in the middle there, like between the battery and the front-facing camera flex brackets. So now we've got more adhesive that we need to dissolve with our 99, and we want to be careful with this. We don't want to put a big pool of it, just a little bit. That's how I do it. Just put it on the end of the little pool on the end of the spudger, maybe even knock it off a little bit, and then we're going to get right between. You can see the flex cables here that go into the back of the LCD, right between the flex cables and the back plate or mid plate itself, and just run it along there, and that frees up our back plate of the LCD. So you can see the outline of the adhesive here and kind of match that up and imagine, you know, where that connects or adheres to the flex cable. So at this point, we will be trying to remanufacture this LCD. So you never ever want to flex these flex cables more than you know, the degree to which they're flexed now. So if you open these up, the way it works is they're tiny, dozens of little tiny traces, which are basically like microscopic wires that are folded over here. And I'll go ahead and do it this one because I don't mind losing at least one. So I'm not sure if you can see that, but this is, see all those little traces there? And you also have a serial number. So the serial number indicates which manufacturer actually made this LCD. So yeah, this is Apple phone. Apple, they don't really make too many parts. The beautiful thing about them, one of the most amazing things really, is that they source parts from lots of different companies and then have the phones assembled in one factory. And so as far as we know, LG, Sharp, Toshiba, and Samsung make the actual displays themselves. So that's what we could tell by these serial numbers that are on the backs of the screens. And so that's what this beautiful little tool here is for. This is an EEPROM programmer. And at this point, we can go ahead and copy our serial number from this one and transfer it to our new screen. So what that does is kind of eliminate any possibility of like potential touch issues, because using a different manufacturer screen on a different phone. And this also programs, like for the iPhone 8, it helps with like the coloration of the it's called True Tone. So the iPhone 8 had a thing called True Tone, where it like changes the coloration of the LCD. So we're just going to look at our little board here and connect the LCD connector to the proper slot, and then we're just going to hit read. And so this is just reading the serial number. And so we can just set our broken screen aside now and connect the new screen. And I'm going to go ahead and write that serial number that's saved in here now. It's writing to the new screen. So it's a very important step, unless you're using like an aftermarket screen, which have kind of generic serial numbers written into them. And we're done with our programmer. Alright, so now we just need to transfer over all the small parts onto our new screen. And I'm just checking right now to make sure that that little white sticker is there for the ambient light sensor, the proximity sensor bracket is intact, and that it's aligned properly. Because when they manufacture these lenses, sometimes they don't get it right. Like you can see, this one is a little jacked up there, so sometimes we have to reposition those. But we're also looking for the selfie cam bracket to be there, and then there's a little piece of foam inside here that needs to be there to help the camera work. So this blue part here is just a protective film that we need to remove because the front-facing camera flex where the microphone goes on there, it actually has a little piece of double-sided tape there, and so we want to make sure that we take that off. Sometimes there's like red protective films on the back of the LCD itself. It's a super rookie mistake to leave that on there. Not something you want to do. And there's only enough room in these phones for the components the way they were designed. There's not a millimeter extra for anything else in there. So the other thing I'm going to look at with a new display, especially if we're going to use an aftermarket display, which is, you know, kind of not the greatest thing to do, but you know, they serve their purpose. We need to make sure that this LCD IC is lined up properly. And so you can see here on the phone, this is where it sits. So it just got its little bed right there, and that's it. If it is crooked, or if you get like an aftermarket LCD, sometimes the covers over these are like larger than the factory ones. You're gonna get a big old bruise in the LCD here if you try to close it like that. So we just make sure the flex cable is lined up with the edge of the backlight here, and that it is square in there, like square as in, you know, it's aligned properly, and we're good to go. So I'm going to start off with our back plate here, and I'm just going to set this down and line it up with the receiver holes here on the side. So when we grab our little screws, this is a magnetic, all the drivers are magnetized, so they can grab these little screws, and it's just right there on the little tippy tip. But when we start these screws, you don't want to tighten your first one all the way. That way, if it's not properly aligned, then you can still move the component and line up the other screws. So we just pop them all in there. Once again, not going too crazy on it because you don't want to strip them out. And we'll make sure everything's aligned before we completely tighten all of them down. We'll give ourselves more work to do. And they're all good, so I'll go ahead and tighten them all down. One thing about this, you want to really follow the process and get the process down, so that you don't jump ahead and have to like go back and, you know, partially disassemble the phone again to correct one of your mistakes. So here we go with the FFC, and so there's two little nipples here where the and there's two little holes on the flex cable itself, and so we just line those up and the double-sided adhesive is usually still sticky enough that we can just reuse that. And then we just fold. So I folded this proximity sensor and ambient light sensor out to show you, but this actually folds over. Like the ambient light sensor tucks in like this, and then the entire top of the cable folds over on itself, and then these two components just rest down in there. So this is sometimes this is a little bit tricky to get especially the proximity sensor aligned directly into that bracket there. So once we do that, we just keep it pinched down. We grab our ear speaker, and it's important to take note that there is a little mesh on that ear speaker, and so if that's dirty, we want to go ahead and clean that off with a little bit of alcohol and either an old toothbrush or a microfiber cloth, and just let it dry out real quick. So now I've got that all down there. You can see the whole time I'm like pinching it to keep it all together. We also want to flip this over and make sure that the selfie cam is aligned properly inside there. You don't want it to be like off center or anything. It's not going to hurt it if it's off center. It's typically still going to work just fine, but we want everything to be as close to factory specs as possible. So then we'll get our little bracket, and we'll start putting our screws back in. So I usually just work clockwise here, and once again, I'm not screwing them down all the way in case it's not properly aligned. Get the one right through our ear speaker there. And you see my method here. I just these screws are so tiny that you can pick them up, and you see it's kind of like on the side of the driver. Well, I can absolutely just set it down into the screw hole, and then just punch it down in there with the tip of the driver. But typically my method is just to pinch the screw and then start the screw on the end of the driver. And since it's a magnetized driver, then I can just get it right down into that receiver and get it started. But different technicians have different ways, and you'll develop yours too. So now we need to put the home button in. So what we have to do, and we don't want to peel this peel up too much in case a customer wants a tempered glass. It's just going to allow more dust to get onto the glass that we have to clean off before they put the tempered glass on. But we have to peel it up just enough to get the home button through. And so on the 7 and 8 series, the home button actually goes through the front of the display. So you can see here, get it aligned, and then just gently press it down, make sure it's nice and flush, and then we can let go of our protective film. And this is the same thing as the upper flex. There's a tiny little nipple built into the plastic of the frame right here, and so that's an alignment thing. And so we just align that, and then fold this back over, gently but firmly reconnect it. You'll feel a tiny little click, and we're good to go. Now sometimes these flex cables that go into the screen itself, sometimes you have to kind of adjust these a little bit And so what I do is just very gently, push up on it from the bottom of the connector itself, or down, whichever way it needs to go, to align it so that you don't have to struggle with the connection there. So we're going to go ahead and put our home button bracket on. These are these are tri-wing screws. And I usually start and work right to left. And once again, I'm not tightening these down until I've got them all started. This one's incredibly important to not torque down too hard, because this one goes directly into the back of the home button. Here we go. So once I get the last one, I can go ahead and torque that one down because that one's already aligned, but I'll just go back and tighten them up. There we go. Just a little soft torque on the home button, screw, and we're good to go. All of our small parts are transferred over, and we're ready to put this brand new, shiny new screen on there. So we want to replace the adhesive, and we need to clean off the old adhesive before we do that. So the way I do it is use my tweezers, and there's just a little lip here, and just run them up very carefully. I don't want to slip and damage the phone with the sharp ends of the tweezers there, so just take your time. And you can kind of get this stuff to adhere to itself and just rub up on it with your finger and make little iPhone boogers. A lot of times when these screens are broken, there will be dust and debris up in usually the top here. So if that's the case, we want to just use a little ISO, a little 99, and clean that off so that we can get a good stick with our new strip of adhesive. There we go. This black stuff gets all over the place, but it's okay. Washes right off your hands. Right. The bottom here, and there we go. So here's our new seal. It's got 2 layers of protective film on it. You'll see there's a little tab right here, and then we can separate it so you can see how it's shiny. You're seeing the sticky edge now, and so we have cutouts. And this is how you could tell if you had like a stack of them for different models. This is how you could tell which one's which. So this is a cutout for the camera and the little retainer bracket there. And so the way we're going to do this is fold. First, you want to fold your battery connector down without connecting the battery. And we're going to start here on the top left and just get it right in there. We'll go across the top and just make sure it's aligned properly, and then we're gonna just run our fingers down each side. So to get a proper adhesion on this, we're going to take the back of our spudger and just run it along the bottom here. we're just gonna press it down, especially in the corners, and especially the corner where you start. Make a nice connection there with it. So we're doing this a few times because if you start to lift it up, it'll destroy that. You'll have to kind of start over again. But now you see we've got our tab here, and I'm gonna go ahead and pull it up, double check and make sure that it's actually sticking. Sometimes it'll come up with the protective film. You see there, it's being a kind of a pain. So I can actually just get it off with my finger here and lay it down. The other side. So one thing about this profession is that if you get stuck on something, I've found over the years it's usually just better to press on and do a different part of the repair if you can, and then just come back to the part you were having a problem with, and kind of clear your mind for a second. These screen replacements, they become pretty routine, but we want to always keep our attention on all the details and do it properly. And our main goal is to save our customers money and time over buying a new phone, or recover, save their data if they don't have it backed up, which is the most valuable part over the phone. I mean, people's data is much more important than a phone that's gonna last a maximum of like 6 years. I mean, most people are keeping their phones historically for just a couple years, but that all kind of changed when they started making $1,000 phones, specifically with the iPhone 10. It was the first super phone. Before that, it cost $500-600, maybe $400. But as soon as they came out with ones that cost $1,000, everybody knew that the life of the devices was going to be extended from 2 years to 3 to 4 years. Or at least that's when the manufacturer would like you to trade them in. But they keep coming out with new ones that basically do the same thing. Cameras are better, but how many of us are actually professional photographers? And even if you were going to spend $1,400 on a phone, you just buy a regular camera that can actually take pictures from further than 10 feet away. So we're going to go ahead and reconnect this screen. So the first thing we want to do is connect this front-facing camera flex, and so this has a little bit of give to it, just a little bit. So we can flex it over like this, and you can see it hinges right there. So we're just going to flex it over just enough and kind of angle our screen, like you can see I have it angled there, and make our connection. Now if at first you don't feel the click, just kind of reposition it and press down gently. So then we're going to reconnect our digitizer and our LCD, and then our battery connection. So at this point, if I was on a live repair, I'm going to test the phone out before I close it. And I'm going to do that so that I don't mess up my seal, and I don't have to restart the entire repair basically. So I'm gonna go ahead and take this protective film off to show you. Normally I wouldn't do that because I'm not trying to mess up my surface for my tempered glass. So I'm just gonna go through the same tests that I did before I started working on the phone. This one's especially important now with a replacement screen to make sure that we don't have any dead spots anywhere on this screen. It's been programmed properly, the serial number's been transferred over, and we're good to go. So there we go. Home button worked just fine. Front and rear cameras. There we go, very nice. And at that point I can go ahead and close up the phone, because I mean really the only thing I want to know is if the screen works, and you know, the rest of the stuff. If it worked before and you didn't make a mistake and slip and break something, you know, which we call technician damage, then it'll work just fine. So we'll start with our FFC retaining bracket up here. Just two little Phillips 000 screws. There we are. And then our retaining bracket for the charge port, battery, LCD, and digitizer connectors. Here we go. Taking care to put the screws in just like they came out of the phone. And here we are. Goes down nice and tight. And so the trick to getting the screen back in the phone is to start at the top. So I'm going to start up here, and you can see there's like little hooks that go underneath the lip and the frame. And so I'm going to start up here and get the top of the phone in, which I do the top right part first, and then just kind of press up on it and make sure that's flush with the housing. And then I'm going to move down here and do the bottom. And so that should just sit right in there. And then we just run our fingers up the sides and feel for the click. And it goes right in there. So I'm going to kind of press down on that too, around the perimeter of the phone, to get a good seal. And then all we have to do is put our pentalobe screws back in. And tighten those down, but not go crazy on them, because we don't want to strip them out. There we go. I'm going to go ahead and sanitize the phone with 99% alcohol. This 99% is not the best disinfectant, really. It actually evaporates too fast, but if we saturate it, you know, we're doing more than nothing. And there we go. So I'm going to hand this back to a customer. Just go ahead and polish it with my shirt, or you know, a different rag or something. Make sure it looks nice and shiny. We've already kind of tested everything out, but we want to go ahead and make sure we make another call, and you know, let the customer see that we test all functions. And when you make the call, you go ahead and see, this call's gonna fail because there's no SIM card in there. But you know, as soon as the call connects, we just hold our finger over the proximity sensor, make sure the screen turns off. That's something nobody realizes until it doesn't work, and you're talking on the phone and you start, you know, butt dialing people, quote unquote butt dialing them. This home button's a little nasty, so we'll go ahead and clean it off. And that's it. We've got a perfectly functional phone here. For the battery replacement video, just look down in our videos and you can see how to replace the battery. I'm going to go ahead and show you how to clean the speaker holes, the microphone hole, which is the closest one to the charge port here. You can also check the mesh for the ear speaker, which you know, this is a brand new screen, so it comes with new ear speaker mesh, so I actually don't need to do that for this one. But you know, if you were just doing a professional cleaning on a phone, then that's what we do. But we just have an old toothbrush here, 99% alcohol, and just wiggle it around in there. Make sure those holes are nice and clean. And you know, this is something we do for free for our customers. It's a professional cleaning. You can do it at home if you're watching this. Just turn the phone off, typically, especially if you don't have 99% alcohol, and then we clean the lint out of the charge port. This one doesn't seem to have any, but it's a super common issue. Just dig it out without touching the top or the bottom, and we're good to go.